What's going on, Willie P? I watched your video in your response to Captain Solo on the whole idea of blacks needing the suburban blacks needing to pretty much move back to the hoods and make things better. And I completely agree in terms of what you're saying. Here's what I don't think people are understanding. Now, when people talk about the black community, you know, or in terms of what Captain Solo is saying, I think he's more so thinking about, just the black community and people living together. To me, that's not what other groups are doing. For example, coming in from Southern California, the Koreans, the Asians, they all have like the Korean town. They all have their business centers. You drive by LA and you'll pass by blocks where it's nothing but Asian businesses, and I can't read the writing, so I don't know what's going on. They have their own banks and their own everything, but they don't necessarily live in that area. Okay, when they want to do business, they go to a central location. So, if they need to have some, some banking done or some real estate, this, that, and the third, they'll, from whatever city they live, they'll migrate into, the Korean business center and they'll do their business there. So what I think more so what black people need to understand is, we're not talking about black people just needing to live together. I think in terms of fixing the community, in terms of economically, we need our own black business centers. So you don't have to live in the same city. You don't have to live in the same block, right? You may live in a different city, but, if you need to buy a computer or you need your computer fixed, you can go to the black business center and find the black computer guy, right? Or if you need some to schedule some trip or some cruise, you go to the black business community and find a black travel agent. If you need your suit tailored or whatever, and they'll all be centrally located. They'll all be black ran. When I think in terms of Southern California, you have your Asians, and like I said, they have their business centers, but they don't live there. They may live in different cities. So they don't have to live by each other to make their community strong. Okay, because in my opinion, and you've touched on this, even if black people live together, okay, it's not going to make us stronger economically, because at the end of the day, if we need some sort of service done, we're still going to be going outside for somebody else to do it. Okay? And even the whole idea of a black-owned business. So you have to understand there's a difference, and I'm sure you know this. This is for people who are listening. There's a difference between serving the black community and owning the business. Okay, to me, what's going to make the black community stronger is when we run something and we service a whole bunch of different people. The fact remains that there's limited dollars in the black community, so there's not a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Disposable income. Okay, people are just, on the bare necessities, right? So we don't necessarily have the tools to do things that are secondary in nature. Other people have those sort of resources. So why not go into, their communities and compete, but it just be black owned? That's going to make the economy stronger, black economy or whatever you want to call it. Okay. What makes other groups strong is that they bring in non-black dollars. So you can have the black community, or you have the white community. Okay, yes, they bring in white dollars, but they bring in everybody else's dollars as well. Because in a nutshell, we're talking about keeping the black community strong and keeping the black dollars in house. I understand that. But even if we made the point as of right now to say, hey, we're going to make sure that no black dollars leave the black community, there's not going to be enough to go around. There's not going to be enough black dollars to sustain, right, those middle and upper class blacks that are supposed to come back into the black community. There's not enough money there. And you also have to factor in, it doesn't matter how self-contained your economy is, there's still stuff that you have to go outside to get, right? If you want a car, Lexus, Toyota, Mercedes, whatever you want, you want a TV, it's Sony or, LG or whatever. So there's still things that are going to eventually leave. But for the most part, we need non-black dollars, okay? And simply, living by each other and saying, hey, how you doing, neighbor, isn't going to bring in non-black dollars. Okay? And having businesses that, cater to blacks isn't going to necessarily increase the money that we need. We need black-owned businesses. And it doesn't even have to be a completely black staff. When people talk about something black-owned, it doesn't mean that, all the employees have to be black. Even though that you should be able to, the majority of your staff should be black, don't get me wrong, okay? But you want to be smart as well, right? When white people, right, if a white guy wants to open up a shoe store in the inner city, what is he going to do? Hire some black people. So if I'm like, man, forget this. I want to come up with my own clothing line for white girls, right? And I have cute stuff that, teenage white girls like to wear. What am I going to do? Am I going to have a store filled with black men there? Hell no. I'm going to have some white girls in there selling my clothes. But at the end of the day, it's going to be black dollars, right? My accountant or, my guy that's actually doing the behind the scenes work may be black. But in terms of me making money, you have to compete. But at the end of the day, it's black owned. So all the money that I make is going to, black hands. And that's what people need to understand. Okay, and then we can start to see what's going on. But I think the whole idea of just, having black people living by each other, it's not going to do much. Really, it's not going to do much. In California and, throughout here and there, there's black suburbs. Right, Baldwin Hills. I don't know if you know about that show that was on BET a couple of years ago. Pretty much Baldwin Hills is, a black suburb area where everybody there is black. But economically, black people are still doing poorly in the LA area. Okay, because when those Baldwin Hills people want to go off and shop and do whatever they need to do, they're definitely not going to anything black owned. Yet they all live by each other. Their neighbors are black. Hey, how you doing? Right, nothing's really happening. So when they need something done, they're going to a white person or somebody that's just not black. So in a nutshell, right, the strongest black community will be one that is almost like a business center. So when you need something done, you're going in there. Oh, I need this service done. Let me go to the black business center. And that's what we need to see, and that's what we need to focus on. So, hopefully, this can add to the debate. Because, I really think that, what you and Solo were discussing is important. Because I definitely understand where Captain Solo is coming from. I understand his viewpoint. I just feel like the community that he needs to see more should be more of a black business type of community. Okay? And that goes to the whole idea of us stepping our game up. Because for the most part, a lot of stuff is shoddy. Just look at the barbershop, and I love the barbershop because it's like one of the only black-owned things that people have, right? The black barbershop. But even then, they say, for the most part, they don't open on Sundays. I understand that. But I know some barbershops that don't even open up on Monday. So they take Sunday and Monday off. Sometimes they come in whatever, you're trying to get a haircut and they're supposed to open up at 9, but they don't open up till 10, and even then your barber's not there, and it's kind of like, and how the unwritten code is, if you have your barber, you stick to him, but you need a cut or you need an edge up and your barber's not there, so it's just like, man, what's going on? Right? The barber that I have now isn't that good, but he's consistent. He's there when he says he's going to be there. Right? As opposed to all the other barbers I've had throughout my life, you never knew what's going on. They'll just be gone for 2 hours, or I have to handle a bit, this is the third, do this and that. And that's the kind of stuff that hurts black business, and that's why people are not trusting. No, I don't want this. It's not legit. It's not official, And it's true. So we have to step it up in that arena, right? And make stuff legit, because at the end of the day, to me, the biggest goal is having black-owned businesses that also work to incorporate or make dollars off of people who aren't black. And if we're going to get the white dollar and other people's dollar, our quality has to be on point. Right? We have to be better than everybody else. Black people always talk about you have to work twice or even 3 times as hard. So if you have a black-owned business now, okay, and especially if you're trying to deal with, big money, not just little dollars here and there, you have to be on point. Your shit has to be so good that it has to pretty much make it damn near impossible for that white person or whoever to hold on to this whole idea that black people are inferior. Your quality of work has to be stupendous to the point where it crushes any ideas of racism or, oh, these people can't get it done. It is what it is. So, what I want to see as an example is I don't want to see any more soul food restaurants. Okay, I want to see a black-owned, Italian restaurant. Okay, like I said, you don't have to walk in there and see black people cooking Italian food, right? The power of that black-owned restaurant is that the money that's going to be made is going to black hands. It is what it is. I don't know how many, hip hop boutiques, we have out in LA and Beverly Hills here in California where it's all blacked out. All right, the manager's black, the females are Puerto Rican, it's all hip hopped out, right? But at the end of the day, when the owner comes in, it's some, a white guy in a suit who cares less about hip hop. That's what I want to see. So you take it easy. Tell me how you feel. God bless.